By 1934, tensions in Spain were high due to a failed coup by the nationalists in 1932 to overthrow the Republic. The Republic knew there would be more revolts to come, with ambitious revolutionaries in the Nationalist and Communist parties planning for a civil war. The Republic was at its end, with both nationalism and communism on the rise, a civil war was likely. At this point in history, Spain was a loaded gun, ready to fire. They just needed a spark. That spark came in 1936 when the nationalists revolted and took most of the northern part of Spain, starting the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War turned out to be a rehearsal for the Second World War, with tactics and improvements on weapons, mechanized warfare, and combined arms instead of static warfare and trench raiding with mass casualties that had come before it. By creating this rehearsal stage, it created a revolution in modern warfare. To begin with, Germany was able to use the Spanish Civil War as a testing ground for tactics. Blitzkrieg, a lightning warfare tactic, was the first. They used a similar tactic in World War I called stormtrooper infiltration tactics. They used it to much effect in World War I by breaking standstills, but with this opportunity, the Spanish Civil War, they were able to perfect mechanized warfare tactics ahead of the Allies. For example, German tank training in the Condor region led to the formation of combined arms and terror bombing. The tactics were better than anyone else due to the Allies being ready for a repeat of the First World War. But this was not the case due to the formation of Blitzkrieg and its improvements. The Allies would need to adapt, and this would take time which the Allies did not have. By September, World War II began with the invasion of Poland. This example proves that the Spanish Civil War was a testing ground for new tactics and improvements on old ones. Next, the Soviet Union got the test of T-26 to much effect in the Spanish Civil War, a great example of mechanized warfare and combined arms. For example, the bombing of Genoa. 2 Heinkel HE-111s, 1 Do-17, 18 Ju-52s, and 3 Italian SM-79s were assigned to the mission. These were armed with 250 kilogram bombs, 50 kilogram bombs, and 1 kilogram incendiary bombs. The ordnance loaded for the 24 bombers were 22 long tons and 22 short tons in total. The terror bombing of Genoa would go on to be an example for what would come in the Second World War. Finally, the Spanish Civil War involved complex strategies that were a revolution in war dynamics. More specifically, the nationalists was to isolate the ruler by making Madrid into an encircled pocket and taking the food supply. The Republic's strategy was to defend major cities, Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia, and maintain the borders until a broader European conflict forced Western powers to intervene. The outbreak of the conflict. In 1936 to 1939, a civil war was the testing ground for new technologies, especially for the new rising power of the German Reich and Kingdom of Italy, supporting Franco and the Fascist Party of Spain. The Soviet Union and French colonial empire and other non-fascist nations supported President Mazoul Azana and the Republic of Spain. This conflict led to the death of 200,000 soldiers and 140,000 civilians. This includes famine and disease. Outside aid and non-intervention. The Spanish Civil War quickly generated worldwide fears that it could expand into a full-fledged European war. In August 1936, more than 24 nations, including France, Great Britain, Italy, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union, signed a non-intervention agreement on Spain. Some 5,000 German Air Force personnel served in the Condor Legion, which provided air support for coordinated ground attacks against Republican positions and carried out bombings on Republican cities. The most notorious of these attacks came on April 26, 1937, when German and Italian aircraft leveled the city of Guernica in Spain in a 3-hour campaign that killed 200 civilians or more. Fascist Italy supplied some 70,000 troops in addition to its pilots and planes. Spain became a military laboratory to test latest weaponry under battlefield conditions. The latter three signatories openly violated the policy. Italy and Germany continued to supply Franco's forces, while the Soviet Union provided military advisors, tanks, aircraft, and other war material to the Republic. Some scholars argue that the non-intervention agreement benefited Franco, who could acquire amendments on credit from his allies, while the Republic had to pay hard currency to arms dealers to obtain often outdated weapons and find ways to transport these goods into an embargoed country. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration chose not to intervene officially in the conflict. Although President sought out to clandestinely provide some aid to the besieged republic. After 1937, the Spanish Civil War divided the American opinion between those who supported the Republic and those who committed the Republican forces to carrying out attacks on the Catholic Church. Isolationism proved to be an effective motivation for non-intervention. Fears of war and foreign engagements helped to shape American policies in the 1930s. For many liberals and leftists throughout the world, the Spanish Civil War represents a rehearsal for World War II, a conflict between the forces of democracy and fascism. By the mid-1930s, fascism and authoritarianism seemed to be on the rise in Europe. In 1936, when Franco launched his rebellion, right-wing regimists were powerful in Germany, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Poland, Portugal, Finland, Austria, and Greece, and openly pro-fascist and pro-Nazi. Political parties existed in many other countries, including France, Great Britain, and the United States. Some 35,000 to 40,000 volunteers from more than 50 countries rushed to join the international brigades to defend the Republic. A similar number of foreign recruits joined Franco's forces. Approximately 10,000 Republicans died in French camps due to illness and malnutrition by summer 1939. Parties that made up the Nationalists and Republican forces. The Nationalists included ultra-reactionary monarchists, fascists, as well as traditional conservatives who viewed the Republic's supporters as godless Bolsheviks who needed to be eradicated in order to create a new Spain. The fascists believed in authoritarianism, national syndicalist state characterized by radical Spanish nationalism, increased Catholicism, and anti-communism. The Republican forces, too, included a broad spectrum of political positions from moderate Democrats, liberals, and socialists to more radical leftists such as communists and anarchists. On occasions, this broke down into violence. Communists believed in removing the capitalists and turning Spain into a socialist state. Nationalist repression targeted civilians and leftists with an estimated range from 100,000 to 200,000 deaths, including the roughly 20,000 to 50,000 executions after the war's end. Republican repression, Red Terror, targeted perceived enemies of the Republic, with deaths estimated between 38,000 and 110,000. Even prisoners of war were killed by the Nationalist and Republican terrorists. The end of the conflict and nationalist victory. The Spanish Civil War ended on April 1st, 1939, when General Francisco Franco announced victory for his nationalist forces, following the fall of Catalonia and a final nationalist advance. Madrid fell without resistance on March 28, 1939, when the conflict, which began in 1936, saw the humanitarian cost of 500,000 dead and another 500,000 flee to France to escape the new regime. Modern example of lightning warfare tactics was in the 2003 invasion of Iraq with the tactic of shock and awe.